Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Welcome all of you. It looks like we still have a few trickling in here, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today is a webinar with the topic of course, electrical estimating and NECA. NECA, specifically how we utilize NECA labor units. So I do want to just give a quick introduction on McCormick here before we get into this. For those of you who don't know much about McCormick Systems, we've been in the electrical estimating software business since 1979. We were founded by an electrical contractor. The point is this is what we do. This is our specialty. We've been doing it for about 45 years. We are recognized as leaders in the industry. We do have an outstanding and long-standing relationship with NECA. In fact, we're gearing up to go to the NECA trade show here at the end of the month. It's in San Diego. The McCormick office is in Chandler, so it's a 6-hour drive from here. But of course, we'll be flying there. We do a booth every year. My first NECA was in Boston, probably 7 years ago or so, and I've been to every one since, and it's really a phenomenal show. So if any of you haven't been, it really is. I do a lot of trade shows, and it's really the best trade show that we're a part of, that we participate in. I also want to mention that none of you are able to, all of you should be able to hear me and see what I'm looking at in front of me, but I won't be able to hear you. So if there's questions, there is a questions box in the go to webinar like taskbar. You should be able to type in some questions there, and sometimes I somehow don't see them until afterwards, but I'm going to do my best to make sure I address any questions that come up. So thanks again for joining. To start here, I'm just on the NECA website. So I will point out that we are sponsors. We've been partnered with NECA for a very long time. So there we are. Now, I really want to get into NECA's labor units. So just on the NECA's website here, they do come out with a new edition each year. So this is the most current edition. The labor units, they don't change a whole lot. They do update sometimes, but mostly they're adding to it. NECA doesn't have a published labor unit on every single electrical item, but they're oh, I just got a message that there's no audio. Oh, Andrew, okay, so Andrew, I got a question from you that you didn't have audio. Oh, okay, you're good now. Okay, good. All right. See, I'm doing my best to keep my eye on this thing. So okay, and I got some other feedback too that everybody's got good audio. So all right, great. So also just FYI, we do record these as well. So so at the end we will, once it's done processing, we send a link to the recording. So of course you'd be able to view this at a later time or share it with whomever. All right, so back to NECA's labor units again. NECA labor units, they don't typically change a whole lot. They do sometimes, but they are always adding to it. They're adding, they're applying labor units to more materials. Now, of course, they've been around a long time, since 1923, so well before I was even a thought. First off, what is a labor unit? So labor units are, like, for the most part, it's meant to capture the time it takes to do the work. So when we're taking off a job, we need to obviously account for material. We need to account for material cost. We need to account for labor hours, the time it takes to do the work. And NECA does have 3 levels, but there is a description here in terms of what it includes. It's really meant to be all-inclusive. Labor units are, it's not just the time it takes to install. The material doesn't just magically appear on a job site. And of course, there's handling involved, there's non-productive downtime. So labor units are really meant to capture all of that. Now, what it doesn't include is supervision. So that's something that would need to be accounted for separately. And of course, in McCormick, you know, we have a place for that in the bid summary. Now, here's how they define their 3 levels of labor. So NECA 1, 2, and 3. NECA 1 is normal installation conditions, and then NECA 2 is difficult. NECA 3 is extremely difficult. So in a moment, I'm going to show you that we have these 3 levels built into the material in McCormick, and how we. And then I'm going to kind of play off of that in terms of how we can use them differently in terms of factoring and so on. But for now, I also want to point out that NECA also provides a labor factor score sheet, so you can access all of this from their website. And this is something that you would fill out, what they ask you to do here is score each one of these conditions on a level of 1 to 5, 1 being normal and 5 being the most difficult working conditions. So you see there's several, they're taking everything into account here in terms of working conditions, the size of the project, the height, the height, and just a whole bunch of things are taken into consideration here. So, and then what they're saying is, if the score totals up between 36 and 75 total, then you would be okay using NECA 1 for the project. And then if it's between 76 and 134, we would go with the NECA 2. And then between 135 and 175, we'd go with NECA 3. So that's one way to do it. Not everybody does it that way. You know, some NECA contractors will tell me, first off, they'll tell me NECA 1, it's pretty rich. It's got a lot of fluff built into it. And so, depending on your market, depending on your competition, depending on the type of the job, that's going to play a role here. You're going to have to take that into consideration, because even NECA contractors tell me, just straight NECA 1, it would be difficult to win projects. We've got to be more competitive to win projects. So of course we have ways of dealing with that in McCormick. So let's look at McCormick here. What we're looking at here in McCormick is a single item in the database. I have it. I'm reviewing it. So the side window is showing like built-in material pricing, built-in labor hours. Now, just to be clear, there's obviously I could spend a couple hours talking about McCormick, estimating and takeoff capabilities, but we're just focusing on this one component, the labor, for now. And by the way, if any of you want a full demonstration, feel free to give us a call and schedule that with us. We also, if you're going to be at the trade show, please stop by our booth and at least say hello. Let us know that you participated in the webinar, and of course you can sit with us there for a full demonstration on how we on our estimating and takeoff capabilities. But again, if we're looking at this one item, I do want to mention McCormick. We have our own 3 levels of labor. So I mentioned, even if I'm a NECA contractor, I might say, well, for a typical commercial job, NECA 1's a little too it's a little too high for me. It's gonna, I'm not gonna be too competitive with that. So what I could do is I could use McCormick's bid labor, or we also have CO1 and CO2. So that's one way to handle it. Another way to handle it is that if I extended a job by NECA 1 is in the extension, I can factor, like some NECA contractors will tell me, like, I'll discount the hours by 20%. So on like a standard typical commercial project, I'm going to use NECA 1 as my baseline, but when I get to extension, in order to be competitive, I'm going to reduce the hours by 20%. So that's another way to utilize it, to approach it. Now, the McCormick's bid labor is going to be more competitive than a NECA. It is more aggressive. We say 4 hours to install 1,000 feet of number 12 wire. NECA 1 says 6 hours. Now, on some, it's not like our labor isn't necessarily like a factor of NECA. It's not necessarily like, bid labor isn't necessarily 60% or whatever, 70% of NECA. I would say if I had to put a number on it, like on average, I would say our bid labor is probably pretty close to 70, 60, 70% of NECA on most material. But some material it's a lot closer. It's a lot closer to NECA, and some it's a lot less. So NECA, and then also NECA 2 is here at 7.5. Now in this case, NECA 2 is about 25% higher than NECA 1. And then NECA 3 is about 50% higher than NECA 1. But again, that's not necessarily the case across the board. NECA 2 isn't always 25% higher than NECA 1, and NECA 3 is not always 50% higher. That happens to be the case on this particular item, and it also happens to be the case with McCormick's labor, starting at 4 hours per 1,000 standard change order. We call this CO1, we call it change order 1, but I could also use it kind of the same way as NECA in terms of difficulty levels. So bid labors are most competitive. Now, in regards to now shifting the focus back to McCormick's labor units, ours are across the board. Change order 1 is 25% higher than bid labor across the board, and then change order 2 is 50% higher across the board. Now, our database is very complete. We're looking at one of roughly between 45 and 50,000 items. And by the way, there's close to about 30,000 pre-built assemblies in here. But the database is very customizable. We can add custom specs. So you're not only can you change these, like for example, you might say, okay, I like McCormick's bid labor, but I want a little bit more here. I want 4.5 hours per 1,000 feet. It'll automatically adjust CO1 and CO2 because those are just multipliers off of the bid labor. But in this example, this change I made here, because I'm reviewing an item in the database, this would be a permanent change for me and every other user from this point forward, because McCormick is also a true network, a true multi-user system. We're all sharing the same database. Of course, you would determine who has the rights to make changes, permanent changes in the database, but the point is that it is customizable to you. You might like NECA, but you want to kind of customize it, personalize it, and that's fine. We could also add custom specs. I could add a spec called Dylan's NECA or whatever, and so I could add custom specs, and of course I could input labor values into those cells manually. We can also put formulas behind the specs. So for example, I could add a spec that's called NECA, competitive NECA, and the formula could be look at NECA 1 but then discount it 20%, and then so I could just create that spec and add that formula, and so then it would be done on all items. Any item that had NECA 1 would also have a competitive NECA, which would be 80%. So again, I'm just talking about a lot of different ways of dealing with labor. And these are just some, in the next step of McCormick, and I'll go there in a moment, we'll have the ability to make adjustments there as well. Now, to be clear, in takeoff, my job is to account for material. I'm not actually picking a price or a labor unit in takeoff. That actually happens in the next step. In fact, we're typically not even paying attention to to the, to material pricing, labor hours, and takeoff. I'm just accounting for material. Now, of course, most of the time you're probably taking off by assembly, and most of the time you're probably taking off on a digital plan. But for today, for the purpose of today's webinar, I'm just going to enter 1,000 feet. I'm just going to type in a manual entry quantity here. So I'm just going to say I just took off 1,000 feet of this number 12 wire. Now, when I extend the job in the next step, so after I'm done with takeoff, I can extend my job by any combination of price and labor. I can extend by price 1 and bid labor. I could extend by price 1 and NECA 1. I could extend by price 2 and NECA 2, whatever I want. Obviously, it depends on a lot of factors and conditions, but typically we have like a baseline, a go-to. For me, it might be price 1 bid labor. That's kind of my go-to. For you, it might be price 1 and NECA 1, or it might be, price 1 and competitive NECA, that custom spec that we've added or whatever. But the other point I want to make here is something called labor factoring. Now, in the beginning, we talked about filling out a labor factor sheet for the and determining which level of NECA we would be using for the job. So in the next, now remember, in takeoff, I'm just accounting for material. I haven't selected which labor level yet. I'm going to do that. In the next step, I'm going to extend my takeoff by one of those built-in price and labor levels. But let's just say that I'm planning to take off. I'm planning to extend this job by NECA 1. Well, maybe there's just certain pieces of the job that I want to factor, not necessarily the entire job. So that's another way to approach this, rather than using NECA 2 for the entire project and not being not being able to be competitive in that way. Maybe I just factor certain pieces of the job. For the most part, this job is pretty standard, but I'm going to come across parts of the job that are not standard, that are more difficult. So we do have the ability to take off individual pieces of takeoff with the factor. So I'll show you how we do that. There's a drop down here. It says standard. That's the default. But there's a drop down here where I can choose. There's a whole list of them here. Some of them have descriptions like slab, trench and concrete, or conduit in a trench. These are easier installs, so we can also factor down. So that's another thing. We don't always necessarily have to account for more time. Sometimes we need to account for less time. So that's again, these are just a lot of different ways we can look at how we can utilize labor units. It's not always cut and dry, just NECA 1 across the board or NECA 2 across the board. I might, again, if NECA 1 is my baseline, I might say, well, things like if we're laying pipe in a trench, or if parallel runs, another good example of when we might factor down. We might reduce the time, shave off some time there. It's an easier install. Floors, we factor up. The higher up we go, takes more time. Different ceiling heights, we factor up for that. So if it's 30 feet in the air, we're installing this, run of wire or pipe or whatever, or bolt, but again, we're typically using assemblies. But if I take off, let's just say I'm going to take off 100 feet of this, you'll see it shows up in my audit trail with a factor of 1.4. So I'm getting 40% more time to install this 100 feet here. It's this, it's the same item as this. I took off 1,000 feet here, standard. So again, if I extend by NECA 1, I'm getting standard NECA labor on this 1,000 feet, but it's going to be 40% higher for this 100 feet here. Okay, so that's how we take off with labor factors. We also have the ability to adjust the labor factor in the audit trail after the fact. Okay, so it's essentially the same thing, just it's a flexibility thing. In this example, I took off with the factor. In the second example, I took it off standard, but then I changed it in the audit trail after the fact. Okay. Now, even this list of factors is customizable. in McCormick. So these are the list of factors we start you with. You can even add to this list and have custom descriptions and factors here. So very flexible in summary. Now I will show you just to kind of wrap this up here. Let's look at the extension. So of course, extension is a result of everything we did in takeoff. Oh, there is a question here. Well, just while I'm looking, it says, "Is this standard?" My McCormick does not have those columns, so I don't know what you're referring to. Every McCormick, if you have a McCormick electrical database, it does come with the 6 levels of labor. It comes with bid labor, change order 1, change order 2, NECA 1, 2, and 3. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but the question is, does McCormick is this standard? Does McCormick have those columns? So I'm guessing that's what you're referring to. All right, so in the extension portion of McCormick, this is of course a result of everything we did in takeoff. The system will extend by, well, first off, let me explain this report and how it reads. And also let me point out that my system is defaulting to price 1 and bid labor. So that's my go-to, that's my typical, but yours might default to something different. So yours might default to NECA, price 1 and NECA 1. So, but also this is where I could, depending on the job, this is where I can choose any combination of price and labor. So yes, it might default to price 1 and NECA 1, but then I might change it to price 1 and NECA 2. Or or something different. Or if this is a change order, I might switch to price 3 and NECA 3 or something like that. But let me just switch to the price 1 NECA 1 report. Now, the way this reads is, this is the item description. This is the quantity of the material here. And of course, this is an itemized list of material down to the wire nuts, screws, and washers. This is the price of the material here. Quantity times price gives me extended price. This is the total material cost for the job, and then total material cost for each line item. Here's NECA 1, so quantity times NECA 1 gives me extended NECA 1. This is the total hours at the top for the job, and then total hours for each line item. Now, I do want to quickly mention, we can manage material pricing any way that's available. We can work with pricing services like NetPricer and Trade Service, and at this point, I could hit a button, and get today's price from my suppliers. I can even compare multiple suppliers side by side and cherry pick between them, stuff like that. And there's other ways to manage material pricing in McCormick as well without a pricing service. But I just wanted to mention that. Back to the labor, I told you in takeoff that there's we can take off with labor factors. I also mentioned that we can do things here. So one of the things I could do is I could, as a whole, at this, and NECA, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but I had mentioned that we could create custom specs. So if if I needed to be more competitive and I wanted to come in at, let's say, 80% of NECA 1, if I had that custom spec, then I would just choose that report, price 1 and competitive NECA 1 or whatever we're calling it. So again, I told you that's one way you can handle that sort of scenario. But I could also do it this way. If I've just got NECA 1 and I want to reduce the time by let's say 20%, we have a range edit here. So just by clicking on this cell up here at the top, it highlights everything inside of there. So then when I range edit, I'm interacting with every single labor unit in that column. So I could do okay, let's multiply that by 0.8, which is again, which is a 20% discount. Okay, you see how these all turn bold. So that it's given me, now the labor units that are in bold are representing 80% of NECA 1. So I didn't, that's another way to do it. Another way to handle these types of different scenarios. Well, in McCormick anyways. Another thing I could have done too is I could have just reduced the total hours, and that's just, I could do that in extension. So some people might prefer it that way. I could just keep it standard NECA 1 in the last step, the bid summary. I could reduce the total hours by 20%. So that way, there would be a record that this is what NECA 1 says it is, but then we reduced it. So some might prefer to do it in the next step. So again, there's just so many different ways we can look at this, and different ways we can approach these different scenarios. And then of course we can change labor units individually here. That's another option. Now, if you're a NECA contractor, you've got. Let me do this. I will. Let's go ahead and just look at the. I'm going to kind of wrap this up here in the next few minutes. But let me send these numbers to the bid summary, and then I'll look at a couple things in the bid summary that which you would probably find important. I mentioned that you would have the ability to adjust the hours here as well. So let's look at that. This is what I sent over here. I sent over my base bid. It shows the name of the report, price one and NECA 1. It shows the hours. There's a place here where I can make adjustments. So I sent the material costs and the hours here to wrap up the job. This is the bid summary. This is where we, assign rates to the hours, add additional job expenses and markups. But you'll see I can make adjustments here. And again, I could do it by percentage. So I could have done it here, and I could have said, well, that's material cost. Let's go to hours. So I could have done, 0.8. So 80% here, it'll show the difference. It'll show, here's the extended hours. Oh, we just want to do 80. There we go. So this is the extended. We'll just call it extended NECA 1, and then now I'm saying let's reduce that by 20%. So 80% of NECA 1 gives me this amount of hours, and then this shows the difference. So again, here's another place where we can, kind of play with those numbers. Now, I do want to point this out because this is typically very important to a NECA contractor. You're dealing with a lot of different rates, oftentimes different unions and overtime rates and so on. So this is an example list. Obviously, this is something that a client would set up as part of a template in their system, but it's totally unlimited in terms of first of all, this is one group. I've called it my Phoenix Inside group. I have a Phoenix Outside group. I have a local 480 group. It's unlimited. You can have as many labor groups as need be. So if you need 100 groups, go right ahead. Within each list, you can have as many rates as you want. No limits there. I could have 100 different rates within this Phoenix Inside list. And then on top of that, we have a place where you can input your burden. So you don't have to break it out. Obviously, this is up to you. But this is how I have my system set up. Is I have the burden. Here on the right side, these are all my different types of burden. And so so this is the description of the burden, but then there's a value. It's either a percentage or a dollar amount. So this is just a list of all my different types of burden. And then, the percentage and dollar amount that goes with that. On the left side here, I created 2 burden levels off of this list. Burden level 1, every box is checked. So I can assign different burden levels to different rates. Burden level 2, they don't get pension and health or whatever. So again, this is just for an example. But you could have multiple burden levels, and you can assign, when you set up your rates, you can pick which burden level gets assigned to the rate. So an apprentice might get burden level 2 versus a journeyman might get, level 1 and so on. So I'm bumping up on a half hour here. I usually try to keep this about 30 minutes. I don't think anybody wants to hear me talk much longer than that. So I do appreciate the feedback and questions that have popped in here. I haven't seen any, and let me just double check here because I got to open it up. I haven't seen any other questions pop in here. Okay, so with that, you know, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Please feel free to reach out to myself. My name's Dylan Fisher. You know, if there's any questions after I end the meeting here, let me know if there's anything we can help out with, or you know, again, we'd love the opportunity to show you a more in-depth look at McCormick in terms of the overall process of setting up a job and adding plans and marking up the plans. We have really just an outstanding system in terms of all-in-one estimating and takeoff. We can come back and handle change orders, very complete. Today we really drilled down on some specifics, you know, in terms of how we can utilize labor. But once again, thank you all for joining, and hope you enjoy the rest of your week and the rest of your day today. Take care.